The studio lights were hotter than usual, or at least that's how it felt when Karoline stepped onto the set. The applause was polite, controlled, the kind that signaled expectation rather than warmth. This wasn't going to be a friendly conversation, and everyone in the room knew it. Cameras adjusted, producers whispered through headsets, and the audience leaned forward, sensing friction before a single word had been spoken. Karoline took her seat with a calm that came from preparation, not comfort. Her posture was straight, her expression neutral but alert. She'd walked into hostile rooms before. This one was no different, except for who was sitting across from her. Joy Behar didn't bother hiding her skepticism. She glanced sideways at Karoline, lips pressed into a knowing smile, the kind that suggested she already had the upper hand. The opening questions were predictable at first. Politics, messaging, the usual framing. Karoline answered cleanly, deliberately, never raising her voice, never taking the bait. Then the tone shifted. Joy leaned forward, resting her elbow on the table, eyes narrowing just enough to change the temperature in the room. "You know," she said half laughing, "people like you don't just spread talking points. You enable the kind of attitudes that hurt families, real families, especially when you drag your personal life into politics." The audience murmured. A few heads turned. Karoline didn't move, but something in her eyes hardened. Joy continued, pushing past the line where commentary ends and provocation begins. She referenced Karoline's husband indirectly, cloaked in implication rather than accusation. It was subtle enough to deny, sharp enough to sting. That was the moment. Karoline inhaled slowly, then looked straight at Joy. No anger, no theatrics, just clarity. "Say it about me," she said. The room went still. Joy blinked. "Excuse me." Karoline didn't repeat herself louder. She repeated it firmer. "Say it about me. If you have a problem, if you want to criticize my work, my views, my words, do it. But don't drag someone who isn't sitting at this table into your argument." A ripple ran through the audience. Even the camera operator hesitated for half a second before tightening the shot. Joy tried to laugh it off. "Oh, please, that's not what I was doing." "Yes, it is," Karoline interrupted, still composed, still measured. "And you know it. You've been in this business long enough to know exactly what you were implying." The producer's voice crackled faintly in someone's earpiece. This wasn't the script. Karoline continued, her voice steady but unmistakably sharper now. "I can defend myself. I signed up for that. My family didn't. And if your argument only works when you smear people who aren't here to respond, then maybe the argument isn't as strong as you think." For the first time, Joy didn't jump in. Immediately. She shifted in her seat, glancing toward the moderator, then back at Karoline. The audience, sensing blood in the water, stayed silent. Joy finally spoke, attempting to regain control. "This is television. Public figures don't lose their right to basic decency," Karoline cut in, "and neither do their families." That was it. No shouting, no insults, just a clean line drawn in front of millions of viewers. The silence that followed was louder than any applause. Joy opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again, this time changing the subject. The pivot was obvious and everyone saw it. Karoline leaned back slightly, her point made, her message delivered. She didn't chase the moment. She let it sit there, heavy and unavoidable. Somewhere off camera, a producer exhaled in relief. Somewhere online, clips were already being clipped. And in the studio, one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be remembered as another talk show exchange. It was going to be remembered as the moment Karoline Leavitt refused to let anyone cross that line, and made sure everyone watching understood why. The show cut to commercial, but the tension didn't go with it. As the theme music faded and the studio lights dimmed slightly, Karoline stayed exactly where she was, hands folded, eyes forward. Calm. Not the kind of calm that comes from confidence alone, but from knowing you just said something that couldn't be unsaid. Across the table, Joy Behar reached for her coffee mug and took a sip she didn't need. The smile she'd worn so easily at the start of the segment hadn't returned. Instead, there was a tightness around her mouth, a flicker of irritation she couldn't fully mask. The audience whispered among themselves. A few people nodded toward Karoline. Others watched Joy closely, waiting to see how she'd recover. Behind the cameras, producers scrambled. This wasn't how the segment was supposed to go. The notes had been clear, push, provoke, keep it light enough to laugh away. What Karoline had done didn't fit the rhythm. She hadn't yelled, she hadn't flinched, she'd drawn a boundary, and made it public. The red light blinked back on. Joy straightened in her chair and forced a chuckle. "Well," she said, waving a hand dismissively, that escalated quickly. Karoline didn't respond immediately. She waited, letting Joy fill the space. "I think you're being a little sensitive," Joy added, leaning back now, attempting a tone of amused authority. "We talk about public figures all the time. That's part of the job." Karoline turned slightly toward her, expression unchanged. "No," she said calmly. "That's part of your job. Mine is to respond honestly when lines are crossed." Joy raised an eyebrow. "So now you're the referee of what's allowed." Karoline shook her head. "I'm the referee of what I tolerate." A murmur ran through the audience. Again, this time louder. Joy laughed, but it rang hollow. "Okay, fine. Let's move on. Immigration. You've said—" Karoline lifted a hand gently. Not aggressive, not dramatic, just enough to pause the momentum. "Before we move on," she said, "I want to be very clear about something, because this isn't just about me." Joy sighed audibly, glancing toward the moderator as if asking for backup that didn't come. Karoline continued, "There's a pattern in political commentary right now. When you can't dismantle the argument, you attack the person. And when attacking the person isn't enough, you go after their family. That's not bravery. That's avoidance." Joy's smile slipped completely this time. "That's your opinion," she snapped. "No," Karoline replied, still even. "It's an observation, and people watching at home know exactly what I'm talking about, because they've seen it happen to people who don't have a microphone to push. Back." The camera cut briefly to the audience. Several faces were serious now. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was something closer to accountability. Joy leaned forward again, this time sharper. "So, you're saying I'm afraid of your arguments?" Karoline met her gaze without hesitation. "I'm saying if you were confident in them, you wouldn't need to change the subject, or the target." That landed. Joy opened her mouth, then closed it. She tapped her pen against the table once, twice. The moderator finally cleared her throat, trying to regain control. "Let's take a breath," the moderator said. "We can disagree without—" "I agree," Karoline said immediately, turning toward her. "Disagreement is healthy. Disrespect isn't." Joy crossed her arms. The body language said more than any comeback could. The conversation moved on. Technically. Policy questions followed. Talking points were exchanged, but something fundamental had shifted. Every time Joy tried to steer the tone back to sarcasm, the audience stayed quiet. Every time Karoline answered, the room leaned in. Joy was no longer driving the conversation. She was reacting to it, and Karoline knew it. Not because she'd won an argument, but because she'd changed the rules of engagement in real time. The kind of change that doesn't show up in ratings immediately, but lives on in clips, quotes, and uncomfortable replays. As the segment ended, the applause was louder than before. Not raucous, not partisan, but unmistakably real. And for the first time since the cameras started rolling, Joy Behar didn't clap along. The studio lights felt harsher now. Not because they were brighter, but because nothing felt playful anymore. The energy had shifted from daytime banter to something closer to a courtroom hush, where every word carried weight and silence spoke just as loudly. Joy Behar adjusted in her seat again. She glanced briefly toward the producer's table, then back at Karoline. The confidence she usually wielded so effortlessly now came in short bursts. Quick remarks, rushed transitions, humor that landed a half-second too late. "All right," Joy said, clapping her hands once as if to reset the room. "Let's get back to substance. You're here because you claim to represent a new generation of conservatives. So, let me ask you something simple." Karoline nodded. "Go ahead." Joy leaned forward, eyes narrowing slightly. "Why should anyone take you seriously when your entire movement thrives on outrage?" There it was, a question designed to corner her, frame her, reduce everything she'd said into a caricature. The audience waited. Karoline didn't answer right away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, not in confusion, but in curiosity, as if she were examining the question itself, deciding whether it deserved the power Joy wanted it to have. Then she spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "First." Joy blinked. "This isn't an interview reversal." "I know," Karoline said calmly. "It's a clarification." Joy hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine." Karoline turned slightly toward the audience, then back to Joy. "When people talk about outrage, what they usually mean is discomfort. So, my question is, are people upset because we're loud, or because we're pointing at things they'd rather not explain?" A low murmur rippled through the room. Joy scoffed. "That's a nice rhetorical trick." "It's not a trick," Karoline replied. "It's a distinction." Joy crossed her legs sharply. "Okay, then explain it. What exactly are you pointing at?" Karoline didn't miss a beat. "Double standards," she said. "Selective outrage, and the idea that some people are allowed to speak bluntly while others are told to soften their tone so everyone else can stay comfortable." Joy smiled thinly. "You're not exactly being silenced." Karoline nodded. "True, and I'm not claiming to be. But millions of people watching this show feel like they are." Joy raised an eyebrow. "And you speak for them?" "I listen to them," Karoline said. "That's the difference." The moderator shifted uncomfortably in her chair. This wasn't in the rundown. Joy exhaled sharply. "Let me guess. Any criticism of your views is elitism, right?" Karoline shook her head. "No. Criticism is fair. Mockery is lazy. And when mockery replaces debate, people stop trusting the conversation." Joy laughed louder than necessary. "So, now you're the guardian of trust?" Karoline's voice stayed level. "No, I'm just refusing to pretend people don't notice when the rules change depending on who's talking." The camera cut briefly to the audience again. Faces were intent. No phones. No laughter. Just attention. Joy tried again. Faster this time. "You talk about rules, but your side constantly breaks them. Harsh language, personal attacks. You can't deny that." Karoline nodded slowly. "I won't. But here's what I will say." She leaned forward slightly, closing the distance without raising her voice. "People are tired of being told to condemn one side loudly while the other gets a pass quietly, and when they point that out, they're labeled angry instead of honest." Joy opened her mouth to interrupt. Karoline continued anyway. "That's not outrage culture. That's accountability fatigue." The words hung there. For the first time, Joy didn't immediately respond. She looked down at her notes, then back up. Whatever she'd planned next no longer fit. The rhythm was gone. The control she usually relied on had slipped, not dramatically, but unmistakably. "Well," Joy said finally, forcing a smile, "you certainly came prepared." Karoline smiled back, polite, restrained. "I came willing," she said. "There's a difference." The moderator jumped in quickly, sensing the moment stretched too long. "Let's take a short break." As the cameras faded, the applause came again. This time uneven, scattered, but sincere. Joy didn't clap. She just stared ahead, jaw set, as if realizing that the question she thought would expose Karoline had instead exposed something else entirely. And they were only 3 segments in. The break ended, but the mood didn't reset. When the cameras came back up, the studio felt tighter, like the air itself had been edited. The laughter track never returned. Whatever had shifted before the break stayed right where it was. Joy Behar opened with humor. She always did. "Well," she said lightly, smiling toward the audience, "apparently we've wandered into a philosophy seminar." A few chuckles followed, polite, thin. Karoline didn't smile this time. She sat still, hands folded, eyes forward. Not defensive, not tense, just focused, like someone waiting for the punchline to finally mean something. Joy continued, leaning back into her chair. "You talk about accountability, but let's be honest. Your side loves to play the victim while holding power. Isn't that the real contradiction?" This time, Karoline answered immediately. "No," she said. "The contradiction is pretending power only exists in elected offices." Joy tilted her head. "Oh? Media power," Karoline continued. "Cultural power, narrative power. Those shape lives long before a bill ever does." The audience shifted again. Heads nodding, a few murmurs breaking through despite the studio cues to stay quiet. Joy waved a hand dismissively. "So, now this show is the problem?" Karoline's tone stayed calm. "No, but pretending it has no influence is the problem." Joy's smile tightened. "You know, you're very serious for someone who claims not to be angry." Karoline finally smiled, but it wasn't warm. "I'm serious, because the people I speak to don't feel like they're part of the joke," she said. "And when laughter becomes a way to dismiss concerns instead of engaging them, people stop laughing along." Joy leaned forward again, voice sharper. "So, what do you want? Sympathy?" "No," Karoline replied. "I want consistency." That word landed harder than expected. Joy glanced briefly toward the moderator, then back. "Give me an example." Karoline nodded once. "When someone questions institutions, they're called dangerous. When someone defends them blindly, they're called responsible. That double standard isn't subtle anymore." Joy opened her mouth, then closed it. The room waited. Finally, she tried a softer approach. "You really think people watching this feel dismissed?" Karoline met her eyes. "I know they do. They tell me, and they don't want apologies. They want honesty." Silence followed. Not awkward silence, not dramatic silence. The kind that happens when a joke doesn't land, and everyone knows why. The moderator cleared her throat. "We'll move to another topic." But the shift never fully happened, because something had already been said out loud that couldn't be folded back into humor. Joy leaned back, crossing her arms. Her expression wasn't angry. It was unsettled, and for the first time that afternoon, Karoline wasn't reacting anymore. She was leading. The moderator tried to steer the conversation forward, but the rhythm was gone. The show had crossed an invisible line, and no one could pretend it hadn't. Joy Behar broke the silence first. "You know," she said, tapping her pen against the table, "this feels a little dramatic. We're talking ideas, not identities." Karoline nodded slowly. "Except ideas don't float in the air," she replied. "They land somewhere, on families, on reputations, on people who don't have a microphone to respond." Joy exhaled, a hint of irritation slipping through. "So now comedians are responsible for how everyone feels?" "No," Karoline said. "But when humor only points one direction, it stops being comedy and starts being cover." A murmur rolled through the audience. Not loud, just enough to register. Joy smiled tightly. "You're very confident for someone who's been in the spotlight for about 5 minutes." Karoline didn't flinch. "Confidence doesn't come from time on camera," she said. "It comes from being right about what people are living through. Joy leaned forward again, sharper now. "And you think you speak for them?" "I listen to them," Karoline replied. "That's the difference." The moderator glanced at her notes, clearly searching for an exit. "Let's take a step back," Karoline continued calmly but firmly. "When people feel talked about instead of talked to, they shut down. That's not political. That's human." Joy laughed once, short and hollow. "So what's your solution? Everyone stop joking?" Karoline shook her head. "No, just stop punching down and calling it insight." That did it. The audience reacted audibly this time. No laughter, no applause. Just a collective intake of breath. Joy sat back, arms crossed. "You think I punch down?" "I think intent doesn't erase impact," Karoline said. "And dismissing that impact is what keeps the divide alive." The moderator stepped in quickly. "We're running short on time." But the moment had already crystallized. Joy didn't look amused anymore. She didn't look angry either. She looked exposed. Karoline, meanwhile, remained composed, eyes steady, posture relaxed. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't insulted anyone. She had simply drawn a line and refused to step back from it. And everyone watching could feel it. The cameras cut to commercial, but the tension didn't fade with the studio lights. Joy Behar took a sip of water, eyes fixed on the table. The smile she usually wore between segments didn't return. Around her, the panel shifted in their seats, suddenly aware that the conversation had moved somewhere unscripted and uncomfortable. When the red light blinked back on, the energy was different. The moderator cleared his throat. "All right, let's continue." Joy leaned in first this time. "I just want to be clear," she said, measured but defensive. "No one here is attacking families." Karoline didn't rush her response. She waited half a beat, letting the silence do some of the work. "I know you don't think you are," she said. "Most people never do." Joy raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a lecture." "It's not," Karoline replied. "It's an observation." The audience shifted again. Someone in the back coughed. No laughter, no applause. Joy tilted her head. "So now I'm part of the problem." Karoline met her gaze. "Not the problem, but part of the pattern." The word hung there. Joy let out a sharp breath. "You come on a show like this, knowing exactly what it is, and then act shocked." "I wasn't shocked," Karoline said calmly. "I was prepared. There's a difference." The moderator tried to redirect. "Let's bring this back to—" Karoline continued, voice steady. "People watching at home know when they're being reduced to a punchline. They don't need me to explain it. They live it." Joy crossed her arms. "So what? Everyone who disagrees with you is cruel now." "No," Karoline said, "but when disagreement turns into dismissal, people notice." The panel went quiet. Joy glanced toward the audience, then back to Karoline. "You're very sure of yourself." Karoline nodded once. "Because I'm not here to perform. I'm here to say something out loud that usually gets talked around." For the first time, Joy didn't interrupt. The moderator finally spoke. "We're going to take another short break." As the cameras pulled back, it was clear something had shifted. Not an argument won. Not a point scored. But control had changed hands. And everyone in the room knew it. The break ended, but the rhythm of the show never fully recovered. The audience returned quieter than before, like they'd been let in on something they weren't supposed to see. The usual warm-up jokes didn't land. A few claps echoed, thin and uncertain, then stopped. Joy straightened her papers, buying herself a second. "Let's move on," she said, voice lighter than it felt. "This doesn't need to be personal." Karoline nodded. "Agreed. That's kind of the point." A ripple moved through the crowd. Low murmurs, heads turning. Joy frowned. "Then why make it so?" "I didn't," Karoline replied. "I responded to what was already said." Joy leaned back, lips pressed together. "You're very good at reframing." "I'm good at listening," Karoline said, "and repeating things exactly as people hear them." The moderator jumped in. "All right, let's talk policy." Joy cut him off, eyes still on Karoline. "You know, what frustrates me is when people come on this show acting like victims." Karoline didn't flinch. "I didn't claim victimhood." "No?" Joy asked. "Then what was that?" "That was a boundary," Karoline said. "And people recognize the difference." Silence again. No laughter, no applause. Joy glanced toward the audience, clearly expecting backup. It didn't come. Instead, someone in the front row nodded. Another crossed their arms, thoughtful. A woman whispered something to the man beside her. Joy noticed. Her voice sharpened. "So now I'm the villain." Karoline shook her head slowly. "No, but tonight the audience isn't being told how to feel, and that's uncomfortable for a lot of shows." The words landed harder than shouting ever could. The moderator exhaled, trying to smile. "Okay, let's reset." But the reset never arrived. Joy folded her hands. "You think you won something here?" Karoline met her eyes. "This isn't a competition." "Then what is it?" Karoline paused, then answered quietly. "It's a moment people will remember, because it wasn't scripted." The red light blinked off again. This time, no one spoke at all. When the cameras shut down for good, the studio didn't erupt the way it usually did. No chatter, no laughter, just a low, unsettled hum as people stood up slowly, unsure which side of the moment they were supposed to be on. Joy gathered her notes with sharp movements, stacking papers that no longer mattered. She avoided looking at Karoline, focusing instead on a producer just off stage. "We're done here," she said under her breath. Karoline stayed seated for a moment, hands folded, posture calm. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't tense either. It was the quiet of someone who knew she hadn't crossed a line, even if she'd stepped on one. A producer approached. "We'll need you for a quick follow-up," he said, voice polite but cautious. Karoline nodded. "Of course." As Joy stood, she finally turned. Their eyes met for half a second, long enough to say what words couldn't. This wasn't about winning. It was about control slipping, just slightly in front, of an audience that noticed. Joy broke eye contact first. "Backstage," staff whispered. "Not gossip, analysis." "That wasn't supposed to go like that." She didn't raise her voice once. "Yeah, but everyone heard it." Karoline passed them without reacting. A young assistant glanced up at her, hesitant, then said quietly, "That took guts." Karoline stopped. "No," she replied gently. "It took restraint." Across the room, Joy's laughter suddenly rang out, too loud, too fast, as she spoke with someone from the crew. It sounded rehearsed, even now. Karoline didn't look back. She didn't need to. The moment had already left the studio, and it was traveling on its own. By morning, the clip was everywhere. Not the shouting, not the interruption, the quiet line. "Say it about me." That was all it took. The segment spread across platforms faster than the network's own uploads. Short clips, captions frozen mid-sentence, thumbnails zoomed in on Karoline's steady expression. People weren't arguing about tone anymore. They were arguing about why that sentence landed so hard. Commentators tried to frame it. Some called it manufactured outrage. Others said it was a calculated move. But viewers weren't buying either explanation. What they saw wasn't anger. It was a boundary being drawn. Karoline watched none of it live. She sat at a small kitchen table, phone face down, coffee cooling untouched. Her husband skimmed headlines on a tablet, pausing every few seconds. "They're replaying it on 3 networks," he said. "Same 5 seconds, over and over." Karoline nodded once. "That figures." "What do you think happens next?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Outside, the morning was ordinary. Cars passing, a neighbor walking a dog, life continuing as if nothing had shifted. But something had. "They'll try to reframe it," she said finally. "They always do." Online, Joy's defenders pushed back. Context threads appeared. Old clips resurfaced. But the more people tried to explain the moment away, the more it stuck. Viewers didn't need footnotes. They understood the instinct behind it. Don't drag family into the fight. Don't hide behind jokes. Say it about me. By noon, the network issued a neutral statement. By afternoon, Joy addressed it briefly. Measured, controlled, careful not to repeat the line. It was already too late. The moment didn't belong to the show anymore. It belonged to the audience. The next week, the cameras moved on. A new controversy replaced the old one. Another panel. Another argument. Another viral clip fighting for attention. That's how the cycle always worked, until something didn't fade the way it was supposed to. Karoline noticed it in smaller ways. A woman stopped her outside a coffee shop and said, "Thank you for saying what a lot of us can't." A veteran messaged her privately, "I don't even agree with you on everything." But that line mattered. A young staffer at the Capitol whispered, almost embarrassed, "My mom shared your clip. She never shares political stuff." None of them talked about Joy by name. None of them mentioned ratings or segments or networks. They talked about boundaries, about dignity, about the moment someone refused to let the conversation go where it shouldn't. That was the part no one could spin. On air, the show adjusted. The jokes stayed sharper. The edges got safer. Family references quietly disappeared from the script. It was never announced, never acknowledged, but it happened. Karoline never claimed victory. She didn't need to. When asked about it later, she kept her answer short. "I wasn't trying to win anything," she said. "I was trying to stop something." And that distinction mattered, because the clip people kept replaying wasn't the confrontation. It wasn't the tension. It wasn't even the silence that followed. It was the line that reset the room. "Say it about me." In a media world built on escalation, it was a refusal to play along, and long after the noise moved on, that refusal stayed.